So what's up, guys? Just because I haven't kept up with posting this week, I wanted to shoot something really simple and just have a conversation with you guys about just the little bit of an identity crisis I'm going through with this channel. And the hard thing is, it's not hard, I was lucky. I'd started my channel before COVID hit. And lucky in that, I'd done enough with the channel to get monetized. And so once COVID happened, it was, well, this is the only thing you have that's generating income. And yes, there was like some unemployment, help that I could get and some other things that were going on, especially early in COVID. But I always knew that was going to end, and it might end before my employment type really came back. And just to summarize things for people who are new to the channel, for people who have just subscribed, I started this channel living out of my car because I really, financially speaking, at that point, to get out of my situation, had no choice. I could not afford an apartment in the Bay Area. Even the cheapest areas were too expensive for what I was making. And so it was the car, which was supposed to be a temporary solution until I found a cheap room to rent. And cheap rooms to rent are like insane around here. I mean, you can pay $1,000 to be in like somebody's curtained off living room. Like $1,000 a month, I want to be in more than somebody's curtained off living room. I'd rather like live in my car, have my privacy, and sort of control my world. I was not unemployed, but the amount of money I was making wasn't going to afford me like an apartment. And so at a certain point, I was like, well, I wanted to do the nomad thing before. Maybe this is a way I can transition into it. But I never thought of giving up my job, which at the time I was stage managing for theater. And basically, I don't know how to describe a stage manager. They're the person who's, when you watch a show on the stage, they're up in the booth and they're calling the lights and sound to the board operators as they occur in the story. They also may trigger other things that people need to do backstage. They're the person who calls everybody in for the beginning of the show. They're the person all the actors and crew are going to check with as they leave the show. And so there was a lot involved in that. I'd also done some production managing, which is just a stage up from stage managing with kind of the same skill set. During the rehearsal process, the stage manager is in every single rehearsal. They're in every meeting with all of the production team. They're the person keeping all the notes. They're keeping all the notes during rehearsal. They're keeping all the blocking for every actor so that if you have to replace an actor, there's a record of the show. Like if an actor falls off a mountain or gets sick or whatever, somebody has recorded everything that actor does. In an ideal world, you hope it's a situation where you can transition the actors by having one train the other. But if you can't, the stage manager's keeping the master book. They're doing reports every night. It's really hard to explain if you've never worked in or around theater backstage what a stage manager actually does because it's not a well-known sort of skill outside of people who know theater and have worked it backstage. Sometimes I was a stage manager, sometimes I was an assistant stage manager. I did some production management. A lot of it was for small theaters and none of it paid well. Just before COVID hit, I had gotten some really good jobs. I'd started working with a children's theater consistently, and they paid an actual hourly rate. And then I'd also gotten the offer to go to Oregon Shakespeare. And they were going to give me housing while I was there where I was supposed to be working on 2 shows as what's on paper called a production assistant, but I was basically going to be the prep assistant stage manager, and I was going to transition over to the actual assistant stage manager when she was able to come in, because she had already been hired, but she had conflicts. And this was going to be a bridge job for me. I mean, this was me finally getting to the point where I could actually make money as a stage manager. And I was making basically chump change on YouTube on the side, so it was a little side hustle that was bringing me in a little bit of extra money. And I was like, all right, that's cool. I'll take a little extra like pocket change, keep some gas in the car. But most of my major bills at that point were being paid for by my day job, which is why I laugh when people ask me how I afford this lifestyle. I afford it because it was the only thing I could afford. But at the same time, there were definite points in this journey where I was making a choice. Like when I decided to get a minivan, that was a choice. It was like, I can either put everything into getting a minivan, or I can still try to stay in the car and pursue an apartment. And that was an active choice to like, no, living out of my car is fine, except that it's kind of small and I'd like to have a bed. And so what the minivan was going to provide was a lower cost of living and a bed. At that point, I also owed on 3 credit cards. I got the minivan on a payment plan because it was the only way I could get one, and I just needed something where I could put an actual bed in it. And so, honestly, my life was more expensive living in the minivan than it has been in the full-size van, because so many, like, expense factors changed between those two situations. I no longer have any of the credit card bills. I eventually paid those off. One of the credit card bills just got run up, honestly, on vehicle maintenance for the minivan and the car before it, and that was my roof over my head. So I was like, I didn't have the cash, and I had these cards, and I did what I had to do at the time. And luckily, I was at the point where I was finally like digging myself out of that. I was starting to see the back of that. For people who've been on the channel for a while, you may know that I went to the East Coast. I went to Baltimore to close a storage unit that I got when I was leaving Baltimore. And I got that storage unit because I thought I was going to go to California for a year, do an internship, and come back. I went to California for the internship, ended up staying, and within a couple of months of being wrapped up with the internship, and finding a place to rent, unfortunately found myself in an untenable situation with a roommate that I needed to get out of, and so I did, and I got out of it the only way I could. Necessary brief backstory: I tried to become a nomad before. I actually bought myself a Class C while I was living in Maryland. Long story short, it had leaks. I had nowhere to park it. I didn't really understand why it was a terrible idea to like get a RV and try to live in the city in it. I had a situation where I was temporarily staying in a driveway, and then because she didn't like me running the generator and I needed the generator, that wasn't going to work out, and also the Class C had a leak. So I actually sold the Class C for less than I paid for it and moved back into a standard room rental situation. But room rentals in Maryland are way lower than room rentals in the Bay Area, California. So it wasn't as big of a deal. It also wasn't like it was one of those, I tried it didn't work out, and I just transitioned back to normal, whatever you want to call that. But like, that's how I ended up in California. I had thought of doing nomad life before, but even as I moved into my minivan and I wanted to travel some, it was never not having a day job. Like, I thought I was never going to get to the point where I could transition YouTube to a job. It was something I did on the side. It was something that got big enough to start bringing in a little bit of gas money. And I've had these spurts of growth. And I could go through various stages of them, but I've had these spurts of growth that have been really good for the channel, and I've wanted the growth, but I still ultimately always saw it as a side hustle. So coming back to Oregon, I'm living in Oregon. I've been given temporary apartment housing, which confused a lot of people who jumped on the channel at that point, because I think they thought I had rented an apartment and I was leaving the apartment, which wasn't what was happening. I had a absolutely 100% free apartment that was being provided by the company, because they do that because they ship in their talent for the Oregon Shakespeare Festival. So they have housing that they provide to numerous employees during that time. So there was that. And so I had the free apartment. I was in Oregon, and COVID finally really hit the United States good. And of course, the main thing you do in theater is interact with each other a lot. Like, you're on top of each other. There's big groups of you breathing in a room together. Like, I was assigned to shows that were still in rehearsal. So it wasn't even, how do we deal with the audience? Because honestly, the audience is the easiest thing. You tape off some chairs and you separate people. But what do you do when you have actors who need to interact on stage and then want to go home, and be normal people with their family, and they've been exposed to all this? We weren't sure how much, touching really passed the virus. So, you got stage managers setting up stuff on the prop table, actors grabbing them. There's all kinds of things where you're in each other's space. So theater obviously really collapsed in on itself at the beginning of COVID. And there are theater companies that will never come back from it. It's just too big of a financial hit. I think theater's going to take it way harder than film, and we'll see sort of what the transition back is. Obviously, there's always things like one-woman shows and things like that, one-man shows. And I'm sure there's still stuff going on. And honestly, there's states that were like, yeah, there's COVID, but we'll work it out. And they kept going. But in my case, I lost, the job that was supposed to change my life. This was supposed to be the job that was going to give me enough money that in between shows I could do real traveling, which is what I really wanted to do. I kind of stayed on the West Coast. I had done a couple of fun things, pop up to Vancouver and come back. I gone to Arizona for an event called the Rubber Tramp Rendezvous, or RTR, which is a nomad event for people who live in vans and RVs. And yes, I'm explaining it because I've actually met people who are in the RV van community who have never heard of RTR, and I just thought it was a common knowledge across the community, and I have been proven wrong. So I did little trips like that, but I always pretty much just came back to town and lived out of my van and worked. I went and did a 9-to-5 job, came home to my van and did it again the next day. And when I had ideas for fun videos about van life, about living in a van, or really just wanted, my main crux when I started this channel was the stereotype was the good van lifers were the one who had expensive vans. They had to be standing height, and they needed to be doing big travel or world travel. And the thing about van life channels like that is they are also travel channels. So their entire content from the beginning is about being a travel channel. Now, some people also do DIY channels based around van life. Some people do van channels completely based around building. But van life and travel are actually two different subjects. You can travel and not do van life, and you can do van life and not travel. And I knew my life was, or I thought at that point my life was going to be mostly not travel. So going back to my Oregon situation, I lost my main job. I knew I could get some unemployment in the interim, but I was I don't know what I can do for work. So what I'm going to do, I am going to throw more energy into YouTube. And so I did that, and it worked. I threw more energy into YouTube, and it was really just in producing videos. I didn't worry about merch. I didn't worry about a whole lot of that other stuff. I was just I'm going to make more videos. I'm going to make them more consistently because I know views, likes, and subscriptions up your money. And then the other part of my plan was to reduce my cost of living. So I took every penny I got to really get rid of those credit card bills. Again, I'm in a free apartment for a while after COVID. They did not kick us out, even after they pretty much ended everybody's contracts for the upcoming shows. They didn't kick us out because they knew we needed to social distance. Telling people to go and travel really quickly wasn't a good thing. So they gave us, I think, a good 2.5 to 3 months, basically, of free housing, even though they had to cancel employment. And they did feel bad about canceling employment. It was really hard for them. They, as a company, Oregon Shakespeare Festival, really tried to help people get any unemployment or financial assistance that was available. And they were really good people. But my plan was I needed to work myself into a position to be okay. you know, independently. And so that's when I threw all of my energy into YouTube. And I did skip something, so I'm just going to go back to it real quick. Early in my van life, car life, I wasn't just doing stage management or stage management related work, because honestly it didn't pay enough. So I was also working for Uber, mostly doing Uber Eats, because I couldn't do Uber People because I had a minivan with like everything ripped out of it so that I could build a little mini house in the back. So yeah, I was delivering food for Uber Eats. I was delivering food for DoorDash on like when I didn't have enough work to like cover my bills. Otherwise, I was working for Amazon Flex. So in between jobs, I was doing that. And like I said, just before COVID, I really started getting those jobs that were paying enough that I could just stage manage, and it was great. And I really did not want to go back to the hustle of app life. I was also using an app called Winolo. I was using an app called Blue Crew. So I was finding all these ways to get odd jobs in between my stage management jobs, but I wanted stage management to be what I was doing for a salary, or at least an amount of money that would actually sustain me. And honestly, I really started to enjoy the freedom of living in my minivan. Like, there was no point where I was miserable. Was there stuff that was hard? Yes, but I really loved the freedom that came with it. There was this liberation really in living in my minivan that I don't even know how to quantify. But I'm going to jump back to Oregon. Hopefully this storytelling isn't getting too crazy. But even then, even when I was like, can I get my earnings, just my ad revenue, I wasn't trying to do, I was too small for sponsorships in my mind. I was too small for any of the additional ways that you make money on YouTube. Even though I started a Patreon, it was so tiny. It wasn't really going to help me in any way, but like extra money. So any way I could add up money, I really focused on getting more views, getting more subscribers, so that I could like get that ad revenue up. Like, I was more concerned about the money coming from YouTube and if I could get it to a sustainable level, even though YouTube's probably, like I said, the worst boss in the world, because there's a whole lot of whatever. So again, I wasn't thinking this is forever. I'm thinking like right now, this is the most secure way for me to bring in income for myself. So I started making videos hardcore. Then the big thing I still needed to get rid of was my storage unit back in Maryland, which provided an opportunity. It was like I would get to drive across the country, which of course would create content which would hopefully support me getting across the country to get rid of this storage unit and again reduce my cost of living, because I'd been paying on the storage unit for almost 3 years at this point, and spent, like, if you added up, thousands of dollars storing stuff I mostly felt like I didn't want. Like, there was no future plan at all anymore to come to Baltimore and settle down. Or even to settle down somewhere else, take a moving truck there and move all that stuff up, wherever it was. Also, it wouldn't have been worth it. It probably would have cost more to rent a truck and drive it back across the country or wherever I was going than was actually in the storage unit. I still feel like it cost more for me to clean out the storage unit than there was value in stuff in the storage unit, except in like some sentimental items and some personal papers. Some pictures of my mom, like things like that. Those things were really like precious to me, but like in actual like valuable things, valuable furniture, I didn't have any of that stuff. Why I think it's silly to like model yourself after somebody else. I know I got a huge boost when I went out to Vancouver to meet Chrome from University Vanlife. And then people have made comparisons between him and me, and I don't think we're anything alike. I love Chrome, but I think he kind of fuzzes over the details of him transitioning in the van life. He talks about quitting his job and moving into a van and then paying off all his bills, which are like, well, how did you get the money to pay off all your bills? And it's because, yes, he left his day job that he hated but he had still DJ gigs to bring in money. By leaving the apartment, he reduced his cost of living, and he reduced it enough that he could pay for the van life that he was living, plus have money to get rid of some of his debts. And I think when you erase that part of the story, it makes it seem like, let me do what Chrome did. Let me just quit my only source of income and move into a van and everything will be cheaper. And sometimes you talk about, well, think about, the money you're paying on rent will go in your pocket. Well, that's only if you don't quit your job. Like, you have to keep your job for that to be true. Like Static Camper Van. He lives in his van. He has a day job. And when he's free from that job, he uses his money to do things besides pay rent. Like, go camping, go on excursions, And I saw my channel more like his channel than Chrome's channel. More like Static Camper Van's channel. And honestly, I wasn't really affected before COVID by how much I did or didn't make on YouTube. So it was always bonus money. It was like, okay, cool, I'm making a little bit of chump change over here. This is great. But this ain't gonna pay my bills. Like I said, my life was more expensive in the minivan than it is now in this van. Because I paid off the minivan at the point I was offered this van, and then there was no payment plan on this one once I got it, which made this van actually cheaper than the minivan, which is kind of crazy when you think about it. Like, my cost of living was at least triple when I was living in the minivan, and full cost of living was because on top of everything else, I had a van payment. And not even on a nice van, not a big van, not anything, but like a little minivan. I had a van payment on it. I had 3 credit cards. I had a storage unit in Maryland. There was all these other costs when I was living in the minivan. So I couldn't just drop everything and start traveling. And I never thought I would be able to. And people who came to my channel during my trip from California to Baltimore and back again were, I guess, because that is the stereotype, they were like, oh, she's a full-time traveler. Only I've never been a full-time traveler. I've always gone on trips. And really the trip from California to Baltimore and back again was the longest trip I'd ever taken. It was the most I'd ever traveled. I saw a bunch of stuff that was awesome. I drove past a bunch of stuff that was awesome because there was a timeline and there was a goal. It was go to Baltimore, clean out the storage unit. So at a certain point I had to stop just stopping to do stuff. The last fun thing I did before I really speeded it into Baltimore was my Superman video, which came out not that long ago, but was shot ages ago. And so that was in Missouri, right? No. Where was that? Where was Illinois? I was like, it's not Missouri. I didn't go to Missouri. It was in Metropolis, Illinois. And so people who came on during that time began to identify me as a van lifer who does full-time travel because they just popped in on these videos that were like travel videos. And that was honestly great. I had a lot of fun shooting a lot of those videos, and I in fact have footage that I haven't even got to yet that I want to create some sort of videos around, but it also seems so irrelevant because it's old, so I'm trying to figure out a way to make it like, this isn't happening now, but I want to share this with you guys, and maybe that's all I have to do, just do that at the beginning of every video. But again, that trip had a specific mission, was go and come back, which is what I did. But during that time, YouTube became my job. I was using it to pay to get there, and I was using it to pay to get back. But I don't know that I had a vision of what came next. Because we're still in such a weird place with COVID. We're still in such a weird place. I decided to throw caution to the wind and just travel during COVID. It wasn't that scary. It wasn't that bad. There are not border patrols that question you. And that's what I was worried about. But I was also on my original mission. And my original mission was always reduce my cost of living so that I don't have to stress so much about having low-paying employment. And so my life was all about working with the fact that I have low paying employment, or had it in most of my history. Like, most of my history, even when I was doing well by most people's standards, is low paying employment. I don't think as an adult I've ever made more than, $25,000 per year. I don't think there's ever been a year I did my taxes where I made more than 25, and most years it was only 20,000 per year. I've never made more than that. And so I was trying to make van life fit into that or less, which once I got rid of that storage unit, once the credit cards were done, once I no longer had a van payment, had successfully done. And it was like, do I really push hard to risk being this full-time traveler? Because as much as people want that YouTube money, it's like, it's literally the most insecure job you can have, because it's based on your audience not getting bored with you. And like this week, like, I didn't post a lot of videos except my Monday check-in, which I think I did on Tuesday, and that whole video was a downer. And then I just got caught up in life. I did shoot the van tour of the new layout, which I am going to be editing tonight. And if I get done tonight, I'm just going to put it on YouTube, but maybe you won't see it till tomorrow. And I also shot an electrics project I did. I needed to fix up some electric stuff in the van. Namely, I've been having a lot of voltage issues with my fridge, and it wasn't keeping temperature, and it wasn't the fridge's fault. It had to do with the cable that was running to the fridge, so I needed to redo and replace that. And then I decided to just clean up a lot of my electrical back there. I also cleaned up my dual isolator, and so I filmed that this week. But then I also have been going hard on, wow, this video is going to be longer than I intend. I intended to attack this subject a little quicker, but I shot that stuff. But I've also been going hardcore on my exercise, on my health and fitness, which for some reason I've regulated to Mondays. And what I'm realizing is this channel needs to be wherever I am at any moment. And right now, sorry guys, I don't really see me doing any major like traveling before January. I just think I'll need that amount of time to sort of reset and sort of realign completely, and also just to take care of some tasks. I want to get Mickey through all of his like baby vaccinations, and I'm working my way through all of those things. It's really hard to like get the Humane Society on the phone. They do the neuter and the microchip, but you have to get them on the phone. There's all these parameters because COVID, and like, let's be honest, California is really one of the stricter states when it comes to COVID. So there's like getting him through his vaccinations, getting the van sort of in a reset place that I'm happy with before I go on the road. There's just stuff to do. And then honestly, I don't want to be out in the middle of the craziness of Christmas, and it has nothing to do with COVID. I just don't like crowds. Even when I went to the meetup in Oklahoma, I'm holding back because like I get really weird in crowds. Like, I am not good with people. I am really good in one-on-one conversations or one-on-one or two interactions. But like the crowd gets too big and I just start shutting down. And the reason like I can do this right now is because I'm in my van. And the only thing in here with me right now is the camera. And I know you guys will see this, but it's not as much pressure as sort of being in a room full of people. I don't know what it is. I don't know my diagnosis. But moving on. So like I'm really struggling with like, what is this channel's identity? Like, what shape is it going to take in the future? And I think it just needs to be wherever I am in van life at the moment. Like I said, van life and travel are two separate things, not two interconnected things. Van life is living your life in a van. Now, there's always an element of nomadness to it, as I like to call it, because you are moving every day. You may be moving 10 feet. You're not moving in these really huge, epic ways, but you're still, like, you have to know your system to successfully live in a vehicle in the city. And travel is this other thing. And like I said, in the travel category, you can have living in a van and traveling. You can have being a hotel Airbnb surfer and traveling. There's a lot of ways to do travel that isn't necessarily living in a van, and there are ways to do van life that aren't necessarily travel as far as travel as content. And this channel has become a mix of both, and I think that's a part of its future, but it's also honestly my health and fitness journey. Like, a lot of people have said, these videos, but I liked when you did like van life videos, and I'm like, what does that mean? Is that like when I'm doing projects on the van? Is that travel? What does that actually mean to you as an audience member? And I don't know. And I also think part of the problem is I'm treating like my health and fitness journey as this isolated thing. Right now, it's honestly the most important thing I'm doing. Like, besides like a parking lot surfing, as I like to call it, or street side surfing, where I'm just moving around to spots I know I can either sleep overnight or hang out all day. Sorry, I'm in a parking lot. There's noises out there. I don't know if you can hear it. It's a part of my everyday, and I'm trying to squish it into this Monday update, and then people feel like it's a distraction from the main content. But the main content has always been whatever my van life is at the moment it's happening. And right now it's not big travel. That may happen down the line, and you know, some people may decide like, well, if you're not traveling, I'm going to unsubscribe. And I really can't do anything about that. But it is more scary. Early in my channel, it was way easier because it didn't matter. Like, if people subscribe, unsubscribed, it was nice to grow. It was nice to get subscribers. It was nice to feel this outpouring of support from people I'd never met. But it wasn't the make or break of me actually surviving day to day. And I sort of got jumped into that by COVID, because my only thought was the only thing that's making me money that I have control over is YouTube. So let me just throw more into YouTube. But I just honestly didn't think I was the type of person that people would want to follow enough that I could turn it into something sustainable. But now I actually think I can. But I'm so intimidated right now about what that looks like, what that's going to be in the future. But what I got to remind myself is when I needed to switch jobs or do odd jobs in between having theater contracts or whatever I had to do, somehow I've done it. Somehow I've survived. Somehow I went from a channel that was about being homeless, living in a car, and working a day job, and how everybody in that situation isn't like, you know, in a broken down car on the side of the road without a job. Like, I wanted to show that's not everybody in the situation. That's where my channel started, to transitioning to, yeah, I live a weird life. I live in a van, you know, I sleep on the street sometimes. I sleep in the middle of the woods sometimes. But this is my house. Wherever I am, this is. When I need to take care of things, that's where this is. So yeah, that's a really rambly thought video. I'm probably not going to edit this, and I should, because it's like almost 35 minutes long. And people, like, long on YouTube is like 20 minutes, and I've almost rambled for 35 minutes. By the way, Mickey is in the van. He's back there sleeping. I'm not going to wake him up. He's back there sleeping on the bed. He's so cute. The best thing I ever did, guys, was get that cat. And I didn't think I was... That's another thing. I never thought I was going to be the kind of person who could have a pet in the van, because I had so many concerns about having a day job. And one of the reasons I got him was because I thought, no, I can figure this out. I can make this, you know, survivable in a way where I can have a pet. And that felt like a choice I made in power. But I think also, like, I'm at the point where I'm really scared about it, because I don't know what the future is, if this is all going to fall apart on me, like life tends to do the second it gets good, or, you know, and also, like, I was kind of pushed into, like, making the smartest decision I could in the middle of COVID. which was to try to pump up the thing that was making money, which was YouTube. And yeah, I don't know what happens next. I'm seriously going to edit the van tour for you guys, and I will see you in the next video. And so will Mickey. He's so mad at me. Mickey, are you going to see him in the next video? Yeah, he's going to see you in the next video. He's like, you disturbed me, Mom. I was sleeping. You just... I am truly grateful for all the amazing people supporting me either through Patreon or YouTube memberships. But that's not the only way to support the channel. Remember, liking, subscribing, and watching videos all the way through all contribute to channel growth and serving that grand YouTube algorithm. Thank you, everybody.